House of Representatives. This is a day that recognizes that we have had 3 decades without reform of the collective bargaining bill. That is 3 decades in which it was not changed in any way, shape, or form. We have now, as a result of that, expensive and overly restrictive union contracts which are simply unsustainable. This state cannot pay what we've been paying in the past. Local governments and taxpayers need control over their budgets. This bill, as amended and changed, is a bill which will give control back to the people who pay the bill. I would like to ask Brother Huffman to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a tremendous opportunity to do today what really is a problem, not just in the state of Ohio, but in this country, that was created starting about 40 years in the federal government and probably about 30 to 35 years ago in the state of Ohio. The problem simply is that we're on an unsustainable path, both in the state government and the local government. I know in Allen County we faced layoffs as a result of problems with local government, and it was necessary. It was an attempt to increase sales tax, and as a result, that was overturned by the voters, and the commissioners simply had to move forward with shutting down offices and laying folks off. And that's simply not a way to run a government or to sustain services for the taxpayers. We both need to improve the services and allow balanced budgets. But the other goal to this is really to create transparency to the taxpayer. When we see announcements of salaries and those things, often they mention simply benefits on the side, but the taxpayers don't see the ultimate cost that may go in to an employment package or to an expenditure. And so that's one of the significant things that's part of our effort here. My son just turned 22 yesterday or Monday, and I guess I dare say if some of these problems would have been addressed when I was his age 30 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I do not want to be responsible for turning the same problems over to him that are on my plate here today, or even worse. So we have to do something. And this legislation is an attempt to begin to right these problems. And I think it's significant. One of the people who have done yeoman's work in moving this forward is the chairman of the House committee here, Joe Eaker. And you know, everyone likes to introduce the highway naming bill or some other bill like that, and we all like to be state representatives when it's time to present awards, but when it's time to do tough legislation, there's not as many folks, and I'm not sure that Joe volunteered for this duty, but he certainly carried it off. So I'd like to turn it over to Representative Bean.
Thank you, Representative Huffman. I'm a 14-year township trustee, former trustee, in one of Ohio's largest townships, a township larger than the average Ohio city is. I've been involved in contract negotiations, both for economic and non-economic benefits, as well as disciplinary hearings. I can't tell you how pleased I am to see that Senate Bill 5 gives power back to the local officials who were elected to take care of these matters. The process, you know, we had so many witnesses come in. We heard from editorial boards. We heard from city mayors. We heard from county commissioners and township trustees how much they've been looking forward to this and what this bill does. The common theme, 10% of Ohioans out of work. This goes a long way to help Ohio and local governments control their budgets. It was a long and arduous process in the House, the committee. We had We had a marathon session one day, and I mean a day. Started at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and finally ended up non-stop at 3 a.m. People came from all over the state, and by golly, they came to be heard, and it was our decision that we were going to stay there and listen to the very last one of them. The process in total, over 200 witnesses provided written and personal testimony, 60-plus hours of hearings, more than 600 questions. Yes, I kept track of each question and who asked how many. But not one single amendment was offered by the Democrats. I think it goes far in saying that we did a lot of work, a lot of hard work, and I'm very pleased that our caucus saw this one through. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the confidence in me and my committee to see this process through.
We're very proud of you.
Thank you.
I'll step in after Joe. Joe, you did do a great job. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for allowing me to do what part I did with this bill. I want to mention some things on process. You'll see in the PowerPoint, this bill allows collective bargaining for personal safety equipment. That was not in the bill as it came to us from the Senate. We listened to the police and fire, so we put an amendment in that allowed collective bargaining for personal safety equipment. Somewhat later, the nurses and some teachers came to us late in the process and said that, hey, there's certain situations, well, the nurses need it all the time, certain situations where teachers need it. So in committee, we offered an amendment, figuring there'd be no opposition, that says nurses and teachers can bargain for safety equipment. All of the Democrats voted no. All of them. Which tells me they don't care about the safety of these public employees, but they do care about the money and politics involved in this bill. We did change the part that allows communications between the parties. We created a commission for excellence in public service, which was Ron Amsted's idea. It's a good idea. It's going to allow better talks between employees and public employers. So we developed this system and make it work. We also had another situation where Democrats claimed that for some reason, a widow of a safety officer would have their death benefits cut. And Joe and I and others went through this whole bill looking for that. We couldn't find it. Even though we couldn't find it, we put an amendment that said, notwithstanding anything in this bill, we are not going to affect the death benefits of the public employees. So that's how the process went. And I think the Republican members of that committee worked long and hard to change this bill, and all we got from the other side was stonewall.
Well, thank you. And I also would like to thank Joe because he did a very good job in committee, and his temperament is one of the things I noticed because as I sat through committee, I could get a slow-boiled one, but Joe didn't. So I thank him for that. It was a good process, and Speaker, thank you for having confidence in this committee. And further changes that we also made in this bill, it eliminates the jail time as possible penalties for striking. It also prohibits the use of ticket quotas based on performance-based pay. Requires a written consent for automatic union PAC deductions, which mirrors the private sector corporation PAC requirements. Prohibits the fair share fees as a requirement to be a non-union member within an employee organization. And it further goes on in the bill to, it modifies the future collective bargaining agreement. Can only be done when a fiscal watch and an emergency watch is declared. Because the controlling board will have the final decision authority for state conflicts instead of the legislature. And also on the decertification petition, it moves it from 50% to 30%. This mirrors also the National Labor Relations Act. It also clarifies that no existing collective bargaining agreement are affected by the Senate, by this bill. So thank you.
I'll follow up here with some of the technical things. In reading what's been written, there's some confusion. The alternative dispute resolution. This only happens if the legislative body, and by the way, we are holding the legislative body's feet to the fire and making their decisions, they have to make that decision. But what we're doing is saying, if the chief financial officer can't certify, can't say that we have sufficient revenues, in other words, the local body's going to have to raise taxes or sell fire trucks or do something unusual, then if the citizens want to take this to the ballot, they can take it to the ballot. It's a time-honored tradition. It's throughout the code to allow the public to referendum decisions of local bodies. The other thing we have in here is the performance-based evaluation framework. We think we've got a good situation here. 50% of it, and the reason we split it up 50% ODE and 50% the local school boards, we want to be able to compare statewide. So we might let ODE do 50%. On the other hand, we want the local school districts to have a say in their unique situations. So we have the Ohio Department of Education, along with the state school board, put some general guidelines in for 50% of it, and then the local school boards, however they want to do it, set up their own performance standards to make the entire program. We also said that each local school district will also be allowed to add any other criteria to their evaluations to make these evaluations more specific. We think those two provisions, alternative dispute resolutions, are very fair, very measured, and very good for the public employees in the state and the taxpayers in the state. I think we go to, who's up next? I think that's it, Mr. Speaker.
We're going to show a movie today.
Oh,
I just want to talk real quick. One of our staff told me last night that their wife is a public school teacher, and she received a mailing from one of the organizations that's interested in this that said that as a result of this legislation, all teachers will be paid a maximum of $17,000 per year. This was actually in a document that folks were mailing out. And I had an extended conversation yesterday with a couple of teachers from my district as they presented some of these things that they were being told that, and I explained to them they weren't in the bill and were clearly untrue. And, you know, and I asked them, I said, you really believe that those things can be true? Well, you know, someone sent it to us who's on our side, so it must be true. And, you know, ultimately these issues are determined by public opinion, frankly, by what people know. And that's why it's important, obviously, that you all are here today to talk about the details of the bill that John and Lou and Joe went through. But we also want to give every opportunity for the public to know specifically what's in the bill and to address issues that are being placed out there in the public and in facts that are false. And towards that end, we've developed a website. And there it is, sb5truth.com, which will address specific issues that are sent out to folks, either by mail or whatever it may be, and allow people to either see the actual bill language or direct folks to the places where they can get information about these things and get better explanations. And this is going to be updated because my assumption is that once we correct a specific false statement, there are going to be more false statements that come out as this process moves forward. So we're going to continue to update this on a regular basis. We think this is a great way for the public and certainly you all also to obtain more information and specific information that sometimes isn't available. So.
What content was
Well, I suppose they're going to bill me for it. That's what usually happens. I think it's coming out of Bull Rock. We'll have a Republican campaign committee. All right, campaign.
No taxpayer dollars were expended.
Oh, gosh.
To be more specific.
Is the Senate involved in that at all, in that website?
My understanding as of this morning is that they're involved with us in it and that we're going to, they may also have their own website as well, but at least they're going to be involved in
So who decides which articles to link to, which editorials, and who's generating the content for it?
Well, generally Ditto does that. but he consults with some of us.
Ready when you are, sir. You ready?